you have a voice, and your voice is worth sharing, whatever you are, whatever stage you're in. Um, However you put it down, only you can tell that story, and only you can tell it in the way you tell it. And that's critical. That's important to get that out there.
For years, Barbara Boyle enjoyed a colorful worldwide career as a creative director at Saatchi & Saatchi, Gray, Lowe, and other advertising agencies, creating commercials and stories for Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, Mars Inc., and others, dozens of other marketers. Her flash fiction has appeared in Sky Island Journal, Star 82 Review, Flash Fiction Magazine, and other literary journals. She joins me today on Uncorking a Story to discuss her debut memoir, Pinch Me. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Barbara.
Thank you, Mike. So nice to be here. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. And I'm curious, Barbara, where does your story as an author begin?
Um, Gee, that's an interesting question. I think it began when I was about 4. You know, I was the youngest in the family, and I had stories to tell, and I would just continue telling them until I would get somebody's attention in the family. And it kind of followed me through my life. I became an English major for the same reason. It's what I could do best, I felt. It's really all I cared about. Um, and then I started realizing after college that there were jobs where you could write for a living. And I couldn't believe it. I thought that was too good to be true. Finally, I started at a publishing company, fell into the advertising department where I fell into writing ads for the publishing company. And I went, I'm a round peg in a round hole here. It's something I loved and it was fun and I enjoyed. And I think at that time I had um, negotiated a salary of $8,500 a year. So I was pretty excited at that big paying job. And that was where I started. Um, and I remember once, the first time I was at a party, and my date introduced me as, "This is Barbara. She's a writer." And I sort of was knocked over and said, "I am? I am." And I kind of sat up straight going, "I'm a writer." And it just sounded so good to be a writer out loud because it is kind of who I am and always have been. Even when I retired after 36 years in advertising, I sort of started a blog or a website and I put down Barbara Boyle writer because in spite of all the ads and the creative directing and all the various things I've done in my career, I am at my core a writer, and I guess I always will be. So as an author, that flowed naturally out of it, but it took a while. It took 36 years of advertising under my belt before I really had the time to just do what I wanted to. And I found myself in Italy with this amazing world going on around me, these charming people and these incredible stories each day that happened to me where I would just notice that this is an extraordinary morning. This is a charming afternoon, and I had to put it down in words. So I started a little blog just for my friends, as if to stay in touch, because we're living in northern Italy in the middle of nowhere. And I was writing the blog once or twice a week just to keep in touch with them so they could picture my life. And it kind of grew. My friends liked it and it kept going and going. And finally, after a year or two, I said, maybe this is a book. And those were the early roots of Pinch Me, waking up in a 300-year-old Italian farmhouse, which is what I'm doing now whenever I can.
Well, tell me that journey from taking that blog and turning it into a memoir. What was that like, and what did you learn about yourself along the way?
That wasn't an obvious one. I mean, I remember sitting on the couch in my house and I wrote the introduction and thinking that this is an extraordinary world I'm in. I'm so lucky. I'm surrounded by a town of fantasy with castles on the hills and neat little gardens in the homes around me. Extraordinary food, beautiful vistas, rolling hills filled with vineyards, all the way out to the snow-capped Alps. This is where I live. I mean, this is an enchanted world, and I often felt like Alice falling through the looking glass into a wonderland of really a special place to be. So I sort of just set that as um, the setting of where the story was coming from, and started at the beginning of how we found it, um, how it became increasingly obvious that we were smitten by it and needed to spend more time there until finally we moved full time there. Until the interesting plot twist later on, where we had to come back to the city, to San Francisco, for me to undergo cancer treatment. And then I remember thinking at that time, well, at least now I have an end to the book. Now I know where it ends. Um, and it was a happy ending, as you can tell. I'm doing fine, but it was capturing the life I'd been living in little segments in the whole story. From from the blog to the book to really this is my life now.
Yeah. I mean, how would you compare it or contrast it to your life before, like your corporate career? You know, are they two completely different lives?
I hope I'm the same person, maybe a little better, but the day-to-day lives are completely different. I was just reading again this morning because I think this is the reading I'm going to do up in Seattle on Monday at my event, um, about how when I was first in Italy, we were working on this old home. It's a 300-year-old barn, stone barn, and we had to make it into a home, which was, formidable as a task, but, it was fun. It was a great project. We were living next door at this tiny little guest house where we could keep an eye on the construction and still have a clean place to cook and eat and sleep at night. So we would come for a month at a time. I think we were paying $100 a week to stay there. And you started living the life that the people around you are living. And I'm get up in the morning. I have a sink the size of a shoebox to do our dishes, but that's okay because we only had two plates, two mugs, and a couple of forks. But I realized if I don't get up, have breakfast, wash all my dishes by hand, dry them, put them away, go off and do my errands. If I come back at noon, I have no place to eat, nothing, you really are back to basics. So we'd have to take the dry dishes and have our lunch, wash them, dry them, put them away. So we had dinner. We're so spoiled in our lives now with dishwashers and, you know, vacuum cleaners, all kinds of automated things in our life. We were living fairly simply. And I kind of liked it. I found it surprisingly comforting and satisfying. I flash back to when I was a young girl learning at my mother's side, how to clean a house, how to sweep a kitchen floor, how to hang up sheets with clothespins on the line. We didn't have a washer and dryer then either growing up. And it really brought me back to those times. And I was surprised at the pleasure I had in in those basic things that you were doing. So that life was very simple. On the other hand, the food we ate or we eat when we're in Italy, and we eat a lot of it, is so much more delicious than you would expect it to be because it is fresh, from hours earlier. Half the time, the fruit and vegetables have been picked. The pasta is handmade, fresh with lots of egg yolks, so it's nice and rich and golden yellow. The sauces are handmade, and if they're made in advance, they're packed in glass. They're not canned. So every detail, the food is just incredibly better, and the people are lovely. So in many ways, it's a very, very different. It feels very much um, like I'm at home though when I'm there. Interestingly, I feel very comfortable there.
Yeah. Yeah, because the name Boyle doesn't sound too Italian to me.
No, my husband's McGuire. Neither one of us are even a drop Italian, sadly, because they're really wonderful people and they're especially kind. They're great cooks and they're funny. I can't quite understand it. I try and capture it in words that they're humble people. They work with their hands. They're all farmers, kind of small little local wineries, farms, hazelnut orchards, very small, but they're very proud. They stand tall. They know their values. They don't um, look down on anybody. They don't look up to anybody. They look you in the eye, with warmth and kindness. They're pretty remarkable. So I'm learning from them, I hope.
What initially brought you to Italy?
It didn't, it's not like we went to Italy to start a new life. We were just there on our honeymoon. My husband and I, this is second marriages for both of us. And we had a real quiet ceremony in December at a local guitar store with my husband's two sons as our best man and maid of honor. And they had to fight over who was the maid of honor and who was the best man, the two guys. But it was a lovely, tiny ceremony, and it was perfect for us at that time in our lives. So a couple of months later, we took a 2 week vacation with a week in the south of France and a week in the northern Italy. I had no idea where we were going. I just went onto a website and looked for something in the area. I didn't know it very well. In fact, I'd never been there. But I thought, well, we're going in and out of Geneva. So south of France is near Geneva, northern Italy is near Geneva. And I could have just as easily been throwing a dart at a map to find where we were in Piedmont. But when we got there, all these amazing things started happening. We had a week of just absolute enchantment. So we came back and said, wow, that was different. I could almost live there someday. And I think a lot of people do that. They'll take a vacation and they come back and say, I could live there. I could live in Paris. I could live in the Bahamas when you come home. And then you forget about it. You get back to your normal life and you don't. But we couldn't forget about it. It just kept gnawing at me, this beautiful little town and this amazing everything. I could really picture myself waking up in the morning and looking out at the vineyards and drinking coffee and thinking, this is my house. So we thought we'd go back and take a look again and say, maybe this would be a fun project in our retirement. I wasn't working much. My husband was winding down his job. And maybe this could be a summer house for us or something like that. Because the real estate is quite reasonable. It's not expensive by our standards at all. So we went back to the same town. We went to a couple other towns. They just weren't the same. We finally get back to Monforte Alba and decided, no, it was this town. There's something about this town that was a real draw. And in the 10 days we were there looking at homes, just kind of for fun, maybe possibly, we fell in love with this one structure that was a falling down, decrepit, rusted, mud-filled barn with a little house attached to it. And yet there was something about it that when we pulled up, I said, this is it. This is where I could spend the rest of my days. And I still might. We bought it for not very much money, came back to this. We got back on the plane coming back to San Francisco, looked at each other and said, what have we done? But then we said at the same time, okay, so this could be an adventure. If you buy real estate, it's not like you're throwing money out the window. You have something to show for it. It's probably a good investment. It wasn't that expensive at all. And we just said, well, let's just see how it goes. We'll take it a step at a time. And before we knew it, we were in love. We'd finished the home. It was more beautiful than I could have imagined. And it was the best thing we've ever done.
I mean, I love how that story begins on a honeymoon where you're starting a new life together. And I think there's something about rebuilding a house that is like rebuilding a life. I mean, there's some parallels there to kind of what was going on in your life. What was the rebuilding process like, and the sort of the movie My Life as a House with who is it, Kevin Kline, is like
Love
flashing
that.
in front of my eyes right now.
Love that movie. I was in the back of my mind too. You're very good at spotting metaphors, Mike. It is a metaphor for what we were building, because he has three beautiful boys. I had always wanted kids and never was able to. My career was winding down. I had left, I don't know, 6 months earlier, but had to not work for a year. I had to hang around and because of my contract. So kind of looking for something, and he has done real estate development his whole life. So he was always open to a interesting piece of land that you could look at and improve. So that part was actually, while it was a metaphor, that was sort of pleasant. We found really good people to work, um, fortunately, and they'd be there at 8 in the morning, work till 8 at night. Very industrious, not like you would have expected. It was fun for us to kind of decide, okay, we were two grown people when we met. Now, who are we as a couple? It's not like you met in college and you're the same and you kind of grow together like a stock that goes up. We're two that came together. And this house was where we could express who we were together. I don't think it was that um, conscious, but I look back on it and go, well, of course that's what it was. It was us creating who we are. And it's who I, it's where my heart is. I say my heart always has been in San Francisco, which is true. And I'm back here now just to continue to see doctors as a to be careful. But my heart is really in that home, as is my husband's. That and the kids come to stay with us, his kids and their kids, and they see that as us. I often think I probably shouldn't be morbid like this, but there may be someday when, well, there will be someday we're not around. And I'd like to think that they will get on a plane and come over there and walk around and feel us
Yeah.
and our energy and our soul. Because it's hard to look at those stones and not picture, even for me, the people who've lived there in the 300 years before us. And I'm sure our kids, if they can hang on to the property, will get some comfort, certainly for their father, and hopefully for me too when I'm not around.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful sentiment. It's a beautiful sentiment. I think there's definitely a story there in the, maybe a fiction story. Who knows? But to explore, just thinking about. You said that's 300 years the structure has been around.
Yeah, it's a 300-year-old structure that has been grown onto, like the barn was added to it. But I sit in my living room and there's about a 30-foot ceiling of layers of stone upon it's like the corks I'm looking at behind you, the layers of stone on stone and stone. And they're probably built over decades, and certainly by years. And I do feel the energy of the people who've lived there before. The woman who lived there just before we did was born there, died there at 98, and never lived elsewhere. She spent her entire life in that home with her parents and then on her own. And I really think my next book will be about her. Her name was Emma, and I can't get her out of my brain. I feel like we're kind of soulmates in some way, roommates.
Yeah. Does she ever make an appearance as a ghost
In the
in
middle of the night.
in the middle of the night? Does she ever any unexpected visitors?
I haven't like shook her hand or anything, but I definitely feel her spirit at times. And I look at the sun going down at night and I wonder, did she sit and look at the beautiful sunset, or is she too busy feeding the cows or, making pasta for tomorrow? I don't know. But, having an imagination kind of out of control like I do, I can only picture the things that she encountered. I'd like to go back and explore that in a book.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be really cool. I would read that. Absolutely. Um
I did a quick, well, they're all quick flash fiction. I think it was Sky Island Journals. It was called Garibaldi's Men, and these are a couple hundred word long stories, and it featured her, kind of taking care of the resistance soldiers in Italy who were resisting the fascists and coming at night. And I think her family cared for them, maybe let them sleep in the hayloft and feed them at night and look after their wounds. And it's just a short little story, but she really came to life for me. So I think that might be the germ of the next book.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, one of the ways I like to get to know my guests a little bit more, Barbara, is through a few fun pop culture questions. So I'm curious, when you were growing up, did you have anything that you'd like to watch on TV?
Oh, nothing important, Patty Duke, Gidget, Mary Tyler Moore, the girl going to get her big job in the city, throwing her hat up in the air. Really girly stuff.
Yeah. I love that theme song to the Mary Tyler Moore show. It's like it's playing in my head right now. Was it We're Gonna Make It After All? Was that it?
Exactly. Yeah, you're gonna make it after all. And she was so funny. She had such a sense of humor. Those were great writers on that show. I would have always loved to have been a writer on one of those shows. I'm not funny enough though, but I appreciate it. When someone else is funny, I love it.
What was a great cast? I mean, Ed Asner, of course, Mary Tyler Moore, and wasn't oh my gosh, Gavin McLeod was in that too, wasn't he? He was who
He,
played Captain Steubings on Love Boat.
I think he might have been, and the her best friend. had her own show. Gosh,
Valerie Harper?
Valerie Harper. Yeah,
Yeah.
they were amazing. But Mary Tyler Moore just was brilliant in it. So cute,
Oh,
very funny.
absolutely.
And Ed Asner
Absolutely.
together.
You
Yeah,
know, he was great as the boss. Who was it, Lou?
Lou Grant.
Lou Grant. Lou
Mr.
Grant.
Grant.
Yeah.
And that really was my first job in it, not in advertising, I guess advertising too, but my very first job at the publishing company in the advertising department. I could just see Lou Grant sitting there with his little tie and his, shirt sleeves, kind of yelling at somebody.
How about music? What did you like listening to growing up?
I feel really fortunate that my generation just had the best music that ever has been, unless you grew up with Vivaldi or something. But obviously, Beatles, Stones, Zeppelin, rock and roll. I mean, especially I grew up in the Santa Clara Valley where we really did have those bands playing at our high school and coming to the county fairgrounds. I mean, I've seen so many of them live, Santana and, gosh, Dylan, all those guys. I mean, I think it was the best time to be young because the lyrics were deeper. We were fighting a war that we didn't want to be in, the Vietnam War. So we were rebellious. We were learning how to hear our voice and to express it to our government. But we also like to dance. We also like to party, and we fell in love during those times. So I thought the music was the perfect backdrop, for what I was going through.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to see that Dylan movie that came out
I
in
haven't
December?
yet. I haven't. Have you?
Oh, it's wonderful.
Is
It's
it?
wonderful. I mean, Timothy Chalamet does such a good job at playing, a young Bob Dylan, and it's the period of time like early '60s, '62, up until the his big controversy at the Newport Folk Festival, where he decides to play an electric guitar.
Right.
And but it's a wonderful, wonderful film. I left smiling and crying at points. It's a beautiful film.
He was always in reinventing himself. As soon as you thought you knew him, he was like such a chameleon. But I'm nervous to see it because I'm such a fan of Dylan. I mean, I knew he was never perfect at the time, but as I get older, I look back at what a grand poet he was and what a voice for us, for our generation. So I hope it's good. I was really tickled with Elvis. I thought that was a great, great movie, and I didn't know if it would be, and I thought he did a great job. So hopefully they'll nail it again.
That's the one with Austin Butler, right? I think who
Yeah,
played
man.
Elvis. And every time I've seen it, because my daughter's a big Austin Butler fan, and we've watched a few things, and he hasn't lost the Elvis affectation in these other
No,
movies. And I'm
he
like,
has become Elvis.
he really has become Elvis. Like I can't watch him and not think of Elvis Presley.
Yeah, maybe he has come back. Who knows? In Butler's body.
Well,
Could
some
be.
people say he never left. So
It could be possible. No, that was a great movie. I've enjoyed that one. So, okay, I'll be open to that.
yeah. So thinking back to your advertising career, do you have an ad or a commercial that you're most proud of or you remember fondly?
Wow. I have to say, I've had some really good clients, but head and shoulders above everybody else were my Pampers clients at Procter and Gamble, and it's not an obvious thing. It's not like, oh, you got to work on Apple or something. The people on Pampers were brilliant and so much a part of the creative process and really supportive of us and our ideas. So there was one spot I really loved called Peace on Earth, which was for Christmas. And all it was a series of babies sound asleep at night from different countries, in
Mm.
different cribs and different, backgrounds and skin colors. And you could tell they're different. And you're hearing Cyndi Lauper singing Silent Night, and just right at the end, it says peace on earth. And the whole thing was a demo in their mind's eye because it's a baby sleeping through the night with their dry diapers, the dry Pampers, but also, the future of these beautiful babies that are probably now driving and drinking in bars, the ones that were in the commercial. But it really was so simple and beautiful. And then we did another campaign for Johnson and Johnson Baby. I worked on Johnson Baby afterwards, that was called Thanks Mom, and it was ran in the Olympics. And we interviewed athletes and did flashbacks of them as little kids at age 3, 4, and 8, going to practice when they were 4 years old, learning to ski or learning to swim or do all those, gymnastic things. And they say, "Hey, mom, it's me. I'm here at the Olympics, and it's all because of you, mom. Thanks, mom." And at the end, each one says, "Thanks, mom." And
Mhm.
that was a really lovely campaign to do because I got to hang out with all these amazing Olympians. They're pretty wonderful human beings, their character and their values and their, um, I just think they were really special. And it was a nice campaign because it really kind of made you feel good about moms and about people who do the right thing and work hard and what comes back to you because of it. So that was a really nice campaign too.
Yeah, no, those both. I definitely remember the Pampers one, the Olympics one. I want to say I want to remember it, but I'm not. It's not ringing a bell. But what is ringing true to me though is how advertising has changed over the years, and I don't feel that I've seen. And this is like the old man in me right now. because I'm,
Oh,
be, I'm becoming an old man. I really am. Look, I make a
look
left
like
hand
a kid.
turn. You're wonderful, but I make a left hand turn. I've got to turn the radio down. Like I can't. Like I walk into restaurants and it's either too cold or the music's too loud. Like I am. There is an old man
That
inside
is
of
the
me.
first sign. Okay, that's the first sign for
It
sure.
is, it's true. But I really do think we lost something in advertising, like with just the ability to so micro target ads the way we can do, which was the promise of digital advertising back in the 90s. Was advertising so good people won't even know it's advertising. But it's I think we've lost the storytelling and that tug at the heartstrings component. I mean, every now and then I'll see an ad, and I think Dove did a good job at this year's Super Bowl with one. But um, yeah, and I don't know. I think the ad business is it's not what it used to be.
There's so many different mediums, to deal with. It's hard to have a collective audience to stop and witness, like when Apple came out with that breakthrough
Yeah.
woman running through the audience and killing the screen with her hammer and smashing the dictator who was talking to us all. Everybody was watching the same show, and we could all go back to work on Monday and go, "Wow, what did you think?" And now everybody's looking at their own ads designed just for them. So there isn't the production value because you can't afford to make 375 million ads. You can make, five. So each one's different. We don't have a collective perspective anymore. So that's a shame. I mean, I think we were lucky. It sounds like you too, were in advertising when it was really fun and um, you had a theater that you could play in, and you really had a message you could tell a large swath of people, not to everybody, but to a swath of people. And that I enjoyed it a lot. I had a great time.
Yeah, it's I like to talk guys. One of my neighbors was a copywriter, and he wrote all the Bart Simpson ads for Nestle for Butterfinger.
Yeah,
And
those are
we just take these walks down memory lane, and it's like, wow, that like you were telling stories, but on a wide scale with mass appeal. And now everything is about the funnel. It's about moving people down the funnel, getting them to as close to purchase as possible. And I think you lose some of that, the art of it all, maybe. I don't know.
I think you lose the art of it, the theater, and the collective conscience. We had, maybe they still do, but we were really always aware of what was our brand's equity for Pampers, for Snickers, for the Milk Board. Who are we and who aren't we? Like we would never have silly, stupid talking babies in Pampers. You might do it in Huggies because that was a lighter hearted brand, so you knew who your brand was and you knew what your message was. And that was nice to kind of work within that and try and make it exciting. Who knows? I mean, I'm sure there's great work being done. I mean, they still have the Cannes Advertising Film Festival every year, and they just get more and more categories
Right.
that you can win in. I think people are still trying to be creative. How can you not? I mean, ideas are still important. And boy, you look at how many novels and books are out there now, it's intimidating. There's like 1 million books every year is produced, something like that. And people just keep having the need to share. So you just keep trying, you just keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, let's as we wrap up here, I'm curious if you could go back in time and whisper some words of advice into, the younger Barbara's ears. What would you tell your younger self? What kind of advice would you give yourself?
Mm. How young are you talking? Like early career, early advertising?
I'd say, let's say young girl. Let's say young girl. You're the who discovered that she was a storyteller at a young age, kind of where we began this conversation.
Well, I was lucky. I had parents who were really great and loved me, and two older brothers who loved me but didn't ever want to show it. And so they always made it clear, like at the dinner table, if the boys were pretty rambunctious, intelligent, older guys, 6 and 8 years older, that I'd try to say something and they'd interrupt, or they'd be funny, or they'd throw a napkin or something. And mom and dad would say, now, Barbara has something to say. Barbara, and they would make it clear that even though it was hard for me to get the words out or to speak loud enough, that I had a voice and that my voice mattered. It wasn't better than my brothers, but it was equal to them. And they made that super clear in the family. So whether that was always adhered to when they weren't around and the family dynamic took over, um, I am very close to them now, and they've been very sweet and supportive of my book, and we're great friends. So it's not an issue. But to any young person or not so young person, I don't really care what your education is, what your background is. You have a voice, and your voice is worth sharing, whatever you are, whatever stage you're in. Um, However, you put it down, only you can tell that story, and only you can tell it in the way you tell it. And that's critical. It's important to get that out there, whoever you are.
Yeah, and Barbara, I imagine we've piqued the interest of some of our listeners here. Where can people learn more about you? Do you have a website or social media that you're active on?
Oh, thanks. Well, I write on Substack, which has been a real joy. And in fact, I'm working on one today to go out tomorrow. And it's if you go to Substack, it's tricky to find me unless you type in Barbara Boyle, or it's the name of it is Letters from a 300-Year-Old Italian Farmhouse. So if you can remember either of those. I also have a website, barbaraboyleauthor.com. That's my author website. So, and boy, anyone that wants to pick up my book, Pinch Me, Waking Up in a 300-Year-Old Italian Farmhouse. It just came out last week. We've been having launch events that have been really fun and satisfying. And I'm told it sold out already. So we're already reprinting. So it's been a really fun experience. So anyone that would want to look into any of those, I'd be thrilled and honored. And I'd love to hear from them.
Very good. Well, I will put a link to your website, Substack, and where they can buy the book right in the show notes, so people could just look into the show notes and tap on those links and find you nice and easy. And Barbara, I will say thank you for stopping by, uncorking your story, and letting me uncork yours.
Thank you, Mike. Can I uncork a bottle of wine later tonight then in celebration of our discussion?
Absolutely, I will be with. I will do the same, and I will send vibes out to the universe so we can sip together.
Likewise, and to you. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.